Hey Sean, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing, Tiff?
I'm doing good. I'm staying warm. I'm looking outside my window right now, and it's snowing and brutally cold.
That sounds. Uh, I mean, snow seems. I feel like snow is a nice reward for having to deal with the cold, right?
That's fair. You know what? It looks nice when I'm sitting inside. It's just when I have to go out and walk my dogs, it's not so nice.
That's fair. Because I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, where it gets really cold, but it almost never snows. So we deal with. I think it's got to be some of the worst weather. It's like it's cold, doesn't
True.
snow.
Yeah, at least with snow, you can do outdoor activities.
100%.
I
Yes.
know.
Yes. Absolutely. So, what do you have for us this week?
This week, let's dive right into it. Okay, so this week I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And as you can see on screen here, I have DXC. And so we've had a lot of webinars recently, Sean, and we had the DXC webinar. Then we also had this week a Strapi webinar. And I want to kind of dive into each of them. So for DXC, this is something that we spoke. You asked me the question, actually, I believe it was last week. What is the difference between DXC and DXP? And I'm going to scroll down because I feel like we have a definition section actually on this page that does a really good job of it. And I'm going to get a little help because so from my understanding, DXP is, as it says on here, it's more a digital experience platform. So an example of a DXP would be AEM, for example. Whereas now there's this new term that Gartner recently coined, I believe, called DXC, so digital experience composition. And that's actually where Stackbit would fit under. Was this how you would explain it, kind of the difference?
I think so. And I'm very new to DXC because the concept is so new as well. And it's great that we're finding some terminology to describe where Stackbit fits because
Mhm.
I've known about DXPs for a while, but it felt like the definition was a little bit loose and it was interpreted in a little bit of a different way depending on who the provider was, and it never fit quite right for Stackbit. At least that's how I felt about it. So this is I'm interested to learn more about DXC, is what I should say.
It is. It's very interesting. And that's really why we decided to do this webinar. So the webinar took place a few weeks ago between myself, Andrew was the host, who is a colleague of ours, and then also to Nika, who is a product manager at Telus. And in this webinar, it was really interesting because not only does Andrew really dive into what DXC is, but then Nika also demos how Telus uses Stackbit. So, Telus has, don't quote me on this, but I believe it was a large number of pages that they are constantly updating and managing. And so seeing how they use it with Stackbit was really interesting.
Very cool. Okay. Going to have to check this one out then.
This one's really good. And then yesterday, actually, time's flying by. Yesterday, we had a webinar with Strapi, and in this webinar, I gave a demo of how you can use Strapi and Stackbit together. So this webinar is really for anyone who is maybe already using Strapi and wants to integrate Stackbit, or maybe you are looking for a new content source, a new CMS to begin with, and how you can utilize Strapi and Stackbit together.
Very cool. And I'm going to build on this in a few minutes when I talk a little bit more about some of the newer features we've been doing on the development side. But one thing I was curious about, because I've heard a lot about Strapi over
Mhm.
the years, but I've actually really never given it a ton of time or attention. And so just curious, like, in doing that demo, did you learn anything interesting about Strapi or Strapi plus Stackbit, anything like that?
Yeah, you know what was really interesting for me with Strapi, to give a little context before I share that, usually when I'm working with, say, Contentful or Cloudinary, it's through the browser. I log in and manage content right through there. With Strapi, though, I actually was running it locally, which I found very interesting to do, and it gave more customization. I found, which was really interesting as well, and I share a lot of that in the demo too.
Very cool. Okay. And so but I imagine the end user of Strapi isn't running it locally. You would just deploy, like, self-host it, deploy it somewhere. Is that
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah,
okay?
exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, it was really cool. And with Strapi and Stackbit, it's I found Strapi to be very organized as far as when you go into their platform, how the content was organized. And then it just flowed really nicely. I know that's maybe doesn't explain it very well, but I guess the best way is to just go watch the demo and see it for yourself even.
Great. And so how can we find it? I guess by just going to this page.
Yeah, by going to this page, and then also to I'll make sure to link everything down below that I mentioned.
Very cool. Okay.
Awesome. And then also too, I wanted to share with you our blog. We've had some really interesting blog articles come out recently, and I want to start by highlighting the Twitter one. So a lot actually who is on our developer experience team wrote this one, which is how would you build Twitter today? And he really dives into how do I say, it's done very thoughtfully, I guess you could say, not just, oh, I would use X, Y, and Z technology because this is what's best nowadays. He really goes into, okay, well, what have we learned throughout the course of since it was initially built? And it's a very interesting read. So as always, I'll link that down below too.
The answer isn't just build it in a weekend, no problem.
What do you mean? That's what I'm going to spend my weekend doing.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Super simple.
And then also, sorry.
Oh yeah, go for it. I wasn't sure if you were going to point out this other post because this was one I worked kind of closely with Simon on. So yeah, I was excited to see this one finally pop up there.
Maybe you can, you know what? I was just about to open it. So maybe I know you worked closely with Simon on it. Do you want to kind of share a bit about it?
For sure, yes. And I think this kind of falls in line with we've been doing a lot of exploration around an integration between Stackbit and Figma. And in fact, I maybe while I'm chatting, I think do we have a landing page for that? Because I think there was we did another webinar on Figma, right?
We do. One sec here.
From the beginning has really felt like, beginning meaning the beginning of this newer iteration in the current version of our product, we've really felt like we were solving this tension that exists between marketers and developers, and that in this new modern web development and like the new architectural approach, everything is kind of pieced together, stitched together. And in doing that, we almost took the experience for marketers down a notch, and they all of a sudden had to know how the content of their site was structured and had to work through all these messy form fields and all of that. And that was the big selling point of Stackbit, was that we're making this easy. You just go to whatever page you want to edit, you click on the thing you want to edit, and boom, you publish, you're live. Great. I think what wasn't super obvious to us for a while is the role that Stackbit could play for designers. And this Figma page that you're showing here is super, super interesting. And the demo that follows it, or that is embedded on that page, it shows how you can integrate Figma with Stackbit so that you can have these design tokens as your source of truth, and feed that information into your content editing system. And with this, so this idea with Figma kind of fills out this third piece of the triangle, which is Stackbit can be used not to just enhance collaboration between marketers and developers, but also to add designers into that mix as well and pull everybody closer together. And yeah, you've got the perfect diagram there. And so what this article in particular is talking about is the limitation of a lot of the component generators that are out there, because there are a ton of tools that plug into Figma or Sketch or even products that exist on their own. And the idea for all of those products is to create some parity between the code that developers use and the system that designers are working in. And so I think it was really interesting that both the Figma webinar and demo came out within a week or two of this post being published, because they're both this post is kind of talking about, while those tools are really cool, that they often fall down in practice, or they're just really challenging to get right. And then at the same time, we've got this Figma demo and connection that we're continuing to explore that is saying, we think there's an alternate version and a way to create parity between design, development, and then also to bring marketers together so that we don't have to engineer anything, but that everyone can continue to work in the tools and with the tools that they prefer. So this is kind of like, does Figma demo plus blog post kind of that pulls all those ideas together.
Merges it together. Yeah, I completely agree. And to kind of reiterate what you said, as you mentioned, there are tools out there that help between on the diagram here, the designer to developer gap kind of thing. But there isn't something that really merges like the workflows for developers, marketers, and designers, that they can not only work in their own ecosystems, but be collaborating successfully together.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely the blog post, and then go back and watch the Figma demo. That's what I would do.
Yes, totally agree.
Perfect.
And it's very cool. It makes Stackbit feel like it's not just for one. We don't prioritize one user over another. That everyone who has a hand in building a website is prioritized in what we're building here.
Yeah, I like that. And then on that note, Sean, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it to you for some more engineering and docs updates. Give me a sec here.
Fantastic.
All right.
Moving things around and sharing. Okay. And we're going to share. Screen. Okay. And am I on screen now? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. All right. So we've had a number of really, really huge advancements coming from our engineering team. And then most of those have been reflected in our doc site within the last few weeks. And these are really, really big topics. And so I'm not going to spend a ton of time today. We're just going to pick one little focus topic, but we'll continue to expand on these with little segments and updates from week to week. So the first is that we have launched JavaScript-based configuration. And it might seem like such a simple thing, but it's hugely powerful. And it's this foundation for everything else that is going to come in the near future with Stackbit. Because formally, the configuration file, which is the file that sits in the root of your project and tells Stackbit exactly how to behave, it's the thing that makes your visual editing experience unique to your site. It's always been written in YAML format. Mm-hmm. And YAML it's a classic configuration type of syntax, and it works really well for that, but it's limiting. We can't run functions, we can't import other files. And so as we shift to JavaScript-based configuration, we can be drier with our code and more modular with our code, but we can also be more powerful with how we let developers kind of tap into various pieces and processes of the underlying Stackbit application. So it's really exciting. It's really, this is going to change everything for us. And so the main file now for all Stackbit projects is this stackbit.config.js. So we have a full configuration reference on our docs site, docs.stackbit.com/reference/config. And you can, and these are all broken up into individual topics because there's a ton of stuff you can do already. And we're continuing to explore more options there. Now, this was the foundation for an even bigger feature, which is called content source interface. And basically what it is it's this abstracted mechanism that it's an interface that provides the ability to create this two-way syncing mechanism between one or more content sources and Stackbit. So you can have data and content in like Figma, like we just said, or Strapi, or you could even tap into your product database if you want and bring some of that information into Stackbit and also write it back out. So we're still in the early preliminary stages of this, and there is documentation up here as of a day or two ago. So there's a reference for this content source interface. There's also there's a kind of an introductory feature guide in custom content sources. So you can explore those, but they're very new. My suggestion is if you want to play around with a new source, something that we're not inherently that we're not inherently supporting, that you can talk to us, and we'll work together to build this while we're kind of in this preliminary stage.
And then on that note,
yes, go.
Interject. I'm going to do a little, lead in there. I'll link our Discord down below too. So if you're going through that, Sean and I are always active in there, as well as some others, so you can ask questions there.
Fantastic. And now, Tiff, I wanted to share just a quick demo on one specific feature that is kind of tied to these. But before I do that, did you have, is there anything you think that I missed or should clarify on the new configuration and CSI, content source interface?
Yeah, thank you. I think two things. First, I'll ask a question, which is, if someone is already using a YAML file, are we still going to support that for the time being, or do they need to switch over? What's that process like?
Yes, it is currently supported. We've marked it as deprecated, so the reference is still here. It will still work. There is no end date in sight. We are recommending that folks do make the switch. If you're using Git-based, Git CMS or file-based content, or one of the previously supported content sources, this will work for a time. We'll notify folks when we have a date that we will deprecate it. But if you want to keep your site up to date, if you are thinking about changing content sources or want to customize this experience a little bit better, or any of these new features, then we recommend upgrading to JavaScript. But the one thing, the last thing I'll mention there is that while YAML is currently supported, if you see code within the doc site that is showing JavaScript based configuration, you can always translate that back to YAML if your site is using YAML. It's like if we come out with a new feature, you don't all of a sudden just have to throw all of your configuration away. You can continue to do that, because it's going to be a fairly big effort for some folks. Like for example, folks using Git CMS or file-based content, all the content modeling is happening locally in files, which were traditionally YAML files, and we now support JavaScript for those as well. So as an example, here's what configuration for a couple fields in a page model looks like today, whereas previously you put it in one specific file in one specific folder. And so we try to keep these tabs around where we've got the same reference to both YAML and JavaScript. But if you don't see the JavaScript, you can continue to use YAML for some limited time, to be determined.
Yeah, to be determined. I like that. And to kind of reiterate what you said, it's really just showcasing the next step with Stackbit in continuing to enable developers to work how they want to work, continuing to be so flexible. And this is another step in that direction. Exactly. Let's get to the demo. Okay. I'm excited.
Let's do it. Okay, so there was a really cool feature that we released just a week or two ago, and we're calling it the Programmable Sidebar, and it surfaces as a configuration property called Sidebar Buttons. But let's put it to work. So I've got our minimal starter running over here. It's a simple Next.js site. We can see I'm on localhost 3000, and what I'm going to do is create a new terminal session, and we'll boot up our local development, our local Stackbit development server, and then get things running here. Okay. And we should see the same thing pop up with the Stackbit editor. And when we do that,
we were just talking about having slow internet issues. It's funny. Now it's haunting us.
Yeah, that's right. Shouldn't have said anything. Okay, so now a new button just appeared in the sidebar. It's called Add Buttons. So what happens when we click on it? It says you can customize your sidebar experience over here. And if you click this button, it takes you to a documentation page that is the reference for these sidebar buttons. And we'll notice that this is just a configuration property. And all of a sudden, having some issues loading. I noticed that the image was broken on the last docs page we were on. So I guess funky things happening all over the place with internet today. But anyways, so here is the reference to adding these sidebar buttons. And we can see that we have this property called Sidebar Buttons, and there are different options. And then let's just put one to work. So back in Stackbit here, let's see, I'm going to open my config file, and the new property is called sidebar buttons, and it's going to be an array of objects, and we'll give it a label. What we have here, and this I should back up for a minute. There are a number of different use cases that we have identified for this, and there may be more. And so if you find a need that you're not seeing, then let us know, and we'll work it in. But one example is, this is a super simple small site, but on really big sites, they might have a ton of page models and a ton of data models. And a common practice that we recommend is to keep some of your global configuration, content-based configuration, in one model. And for this site, it's called site config, which sets a site title and it sets some footer text. And that's essentially all this does. But you could imagine, any global object could be affected by this site config object. Yeah. Well, what happens in big sites is it's really easy to get lost and to say to an editor, hey, if you want to update the footer, you got to click the content tab, and then you got to click site config, and then you got to drill down. And it's like, okay, well, we're just back in the old CMS, needing to understand everything. So one case here is we can say, well, I want to be able to add you right to, or I want to add a button that takes me right to site config. So we can add label, and let's look up a reference of what this actually is, what properties we have. So type is a model in this case, and the icon, I'm pretty much just going to mimic this first one because it's a kind of a classic case for us. So site config, and now as I save that, you see my button has changed to this tools icon. And if I click that, I immediately jump right to the site config object. I can click my footer config. Yeah, let's see if I might have messed something up here. It is okay. But made by me. There we go. And I've changed that text. So you can open this, you can jump right to that panel. Again, tons of other use cases here. And one of them is, well, what if I want an external link? Like maybe I want to provide my users the ability to jump right to Stackbit docs as an example. Then we can call this a link, and we'll give it an icon of external link and a URL, docs.stackbit.com. And let's see what that looks like over here. And now we get this external link icon, open it up, and it opens up the doc site. So tons of options here. And there is, going back to that sidebar buttons reference, down here, there's a list of icons. And again, if you don't see what you need, let us know, and we can make those additions and changes. But that's kind of a little sneak peek at the power of this new feature and the ability to continue to edit your visual editing experience just using this stackbit.config.js file.
It's such a great thing to have. Sean, when you started showing it, for someone who is using Stackbit currently, if they want to start using this sidebar, they just have to upgrade to the latest version of Stackbit, or is there something they need to do to integrate it?
Oh, great question. Well, one thing is you mentioned, or you asked the question about YAML versus JavaScript, and this is a case where your YAML configuration will work. You just follow the same structure here as well. I believe this is, we don't have it referenced in the documentation, but I believe your Stackbit version property in the configuration file needs to be 0.5.0 or 0.6.0. Those are the two most recent versions. But I believe if your site is at 0.4, the sidebar buttons might not work as expected. And even if you're at 0.4, you can likely safely upgrade to 5. There weren't too many breaking changes there. Again, any questions, let us know and we can help you work through it. I think easiest way, Tiff, is to post a link or a question in Discord and we'll get on it.
Perfect. Going back to Discord. Thanks, Sean. That's great. Is there anything else on your end from this week?
That's it this week. Tons of stuff to share next few weeks, and looking forward to kind of digging in as we go.
Perfect. I'll see you soon. And just to reiterate, if anyone has any questions or comments, come visit us in Discord. See you, Sean.
See y'all. Bye.